It sounds like a loaded question, maybe even controversial. We're used to hearing that women are more emotional, more nurturing, more in touch with love and relationships. But what if I told you that beneath the surface, men might actually be the ones who need love more? Today, we're diving into the fascinating psychology behind gender and emotional needs, looking beyond stereotypes into childhood, culture, brain science, and social behavior to explore why love may be more vital to men than most people realize. Let's rewind to childhood. From a young age, boys are taught to suppress emotions. Man up, boys don't cry, be strong. Sound familiar? These aren't just harmless phrases. They form a cultural script that teaches boys to disconnect from emotional expression. But here's the twist. That emotional repression doesn't mean the emotions vanish. It means they go unspoken, often buried under layers of masculinity and performance. While girls are typically encouraged to talk, bond, and process their feelings, boys are often nudged toward independence and emotional self-containment. Yet biologically, both boys and girls start life with the same capacity for emotional connection. In fact, research shows that infant boys are often more emotionally reactive than girls, but they receive less comfort and verbal affection as they grow. So what happens when you deny comfort, tenderness, and verbal affection to someone who biologically needs it? They grow up starving for it. Attachment theory tells us that humans are wired for connection. From infancy, our relationships with caregivers shape our emotional blueprint. What we expect from love, how we express need, and how we cope with intimacy. Studies show that many men, especially those raised in emotionally distant environments, develop what psychologists call an avoidant attachment style. They appear independent, even cold, but beneath that exterior, they crave connection deeply. They've simply learned that expressing emotional need is unsafe. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. Multiple studies have found that men often suffer more after breakups or divorce than women. They're less likely to seek therapy. They're more likely to isolate. And when romantic relationships fail, men often lack strong emotional support systems outside of their partner. Many rely almost exclusively on their significant other for intimacy and emotional expression. That reliance can create an emotional dependence. Let's talk about love in the cultural sense. Media often portrays women as the romantic gender, the ones obsessed with finding true love. But what do men's behaviors actually show? Men are more likely to say, "I love you" first in heterosexual relationships. They're more likely to idealize romantic relationships as central to happiness. They're also more likely to equate their self-worth with being in a relationship, though they might never say it out loud. Why? Because culture gives women permission to need love, but it shames men for wanting the same. So men end up pursuing love quietly, with fewer emotional tools and a deeper hunger. Their needs don't disappear. They just go underground, expressed through protectiveness, acts of service, or silent loyalty. But the core remains, a need for emotional connection, just as powerful, if not more so, than that of women. Biology also has something to say. Testosterone is often seen as the hormone of aggression and dominance, but it's more complex. In long-term relationships, men's testosterone levels drop. Evolutionarily, this may have helped men bond more closely with their partners and offspring. Studies show that fathers with lower testosterone are more nurturing and involved. In other words, nature might have designed men to bond deeply once emotionally invested. There's also evidence that oxytocin, the so-called love hormone, rises in men when they engage in affectionate relationships. While the mechanisms differ slightly between genders, the desire to bond is biologically present in both. The difference lies in how we're conditioned to show it. Now let's talk consequences. Men are less likely to seek help for emotional distress. They're more likely to suffer in silence. This emotional isolation is part of why men are statistically more vulnerable to certain mental health issues, especially depression and suicide. When society tells men not to need love, yet their biology and psychology scream otherwise, they end up in an internal conflict that's hard to resolve. Without connection, men may seek substitutes: status, power, sex, or risk-taking. These behaviors aren't random. They're coping mechanisms. They're attempts to soothe the deeper emotional need for love and validation. But these substitutes often fail to fulfill the real need: being seen, accepted, and loved as they are. So what can we do with all this? It starts by challenging the myths. Masculinity isn't defined by emotional stoicism. Real strength includes vulnerability. Emotional intelligence, empathy, and the courage to love deeply. These aren't feminine traits. They're human traits. We need a culture that teaches boys and men that emotional needs are valid, that love isn't weakness, that expressing affection, asking for connection, and nurturing relationships is something to be proud of, not ashamed. Because when men are allowed to love and be loved openly, they thrive, and so do the people around them. Maybe the better question is, why have we spent so long pretending they don't? If this video gave you something to think about, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell for more deep dives into human behavior and psychology. Got thoughts on this topic? Drop them in the comments. I read every one. Until next time, stay curious, stay kind, and never stop learning.